nostalgia, memories, growing up in Central Florida in the 1990s. What a bunch of sappy crap. It's the Sappy Crap Podcast, starring Steve Bauman and Jarman Day. Welcome to the Sappy Crap Podcast, where the names are changed, but the stories are real. I'm Jarman.
And I'm Steve. That's right. The stories are real, or at least how our dusty brains remember them after all this time. At this point, they're just old farts like us.
Pretty much. Our memories are old farts like us. That's true.
Just old farts.
And this episode, we're going to talk about something that we have enjoyed for several years now. So it still goes in the Sappy Crap category.
A decade.
Yeah.
Not a few years. A decade.
Which is tabletop role-playing games, TTRPGs, as kids call it these days.
Yeah, they used to be relegated to nerds who rolled dice and slayed dragons back in like original D&D and D&D advanced days. But now it's become much more mainstream with the popularity of things like Critical Role and tons of RPG play podcasts and YouTube streams and Twitch. It's really kind of come into a new forefront. And
I would say a big part of that, making it into the main zeitgeist of people thinking it's okay and cool, is Stranger Things. Actually kind of brought it back.
Definitely part of it.
Because it was a big mainstream show where they showed kids in the 80s playing Dungeons and Dragons in their basement together. And first I want to ask you, Steve, how many times you've had to explain to normies or muggles out there like what D&D is, and having to explain, no, it's not demon magic. It's not something crazy like.
Okay, I have never met anyone who is crazy enough. And that's because I've only ever played it in my adult life.
Yeah.
I have never once met anyone who's been like, it's demon magic. I've never met one of those people.
Right.
I've never had to defend it to anybody in that regard.
We weren't
explain it.
We weren't in the 80s explaining it, like where it was, people thought it was demons.
Like the devil panic and all that.
I've been in more of like, it's crazy over the top nerd stuff. And I'm like, no, it really isn't that crazy over the top nerdy. It's like, it's nerdy, but it's like, it's just mixing board games with some acting. That's basically all it is.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I always try to stress that there's a little bit of something for everybody. If you really like to be tactical and mechanic driven, there's stuff for that, especially in D&D. Not all systems cater to all these things.
Yeah, kind of like you're playing a board, like you're playing a video game. You can play it like a video game, or you can play it like an improv game. You can kind of do both.
But yeah, a little bit of everything for everybody. And there's rules, which really helps people to wrap their mind around things, because they're like, well, how will this resolve? And I go, it doesn't matter. There's rules for it.
Yeah. And
you'll roll and the DM will tell you.
To kind of explain how to people who don't know what D&D or any kind of tabletop role-playing game is, it's like there usually is one person who is the game master or dungeon master, they call it with D&D in particular, where that person is kind of running the game for everyone else, and they're running the non-player characters. They're making the story unfold, and you're all players in that story. And it's up to the dungeon master or game master to kind of facilitate that story, and you tell them what you want to do in that story, and they tell you how that works out when you make those decisions. And you roll dice to see if you succeed at what you want to do or if you fail. That's kind of the general idea. Am I getting that right, basically?
Yeah, my take on the DM is that the DM is not meant to be a god holding the fabric of reality together. They're there to be a judge to ensure that the natural order of things happens.
That makes sense. And I think
you're
on
not
top of that,
there to decide how reality occurs. You're there to make judgments and give some direction.
And the main goal, I've read in so many or watched a lot of videos, the game master is supposed to make sure the players are having fun. That's kind of the idea too. It's like by making people have fun, it usually includes making sure people are following the rules enough so that people don't get upset. There's a lot of jobs the dungeon master has to do to make sure that people are all having fun equally. Because like Steve said, people are coming to the game with different interests. They might want to play for different reasons. So you have to make sure they all kind of play well together.
And like any collaborative art form,
exactly.
There's a balance to it in that, if you get, now I understand that like it's important to make sure your players have fun, but they can't have fun at the expense of the game, if that makes sense. If you always bend to the will of your players and always let them do whatever they want all the time, it's going to lead to no conflict.
And that will lead to some people not having fun. which is kind of like the balance you have to make, you know?
Well, yeah, and overcoming obstacles and coming up with creative solutions to things, or just sometimes just killing stuff is the fun of the game. And if you don't put obstacles there, then why are you playing?
Yeah, exactly. That kind of makes it fun that you're actually achieving a goal and getting the objectives done in the game. But it's when were you first introduced to tabletop role-playing games?
I mean, I was aware of Dungeons and Dragons as it was really much part of the culture of, and especially since we were kind of nerds in high school, I knew of it, but I can legitimately say I didn't know anybody who played it.
That's the weird part, is that I think you and I would have enjoyed it a whole hell of a lot when we were growing up together, but we just never were introduced to it in a way that we were playing it. We knew about it, like you said, but we never were playing it. I'm so surprised by that to this day that we weren't introduced to it earlier, but we just didn't have people running games and we had such nerdy friends and we just didn't do it, and we would have loved it.
Oh yeah. But my first real interaction was a game that you got me invited to that we played remotely, Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 edition.
Yeah.
Which was run by a great GM, Cameron. I'm fine to use his real name because he was real good. And
he was also a guest on one of our early A Play on Nerds podcasts.
Wow, like episode 12 or something.
Back in the day, he was on there.
Back. And it was maybe, I'm not going to say it wasn't the best first experience, but looking back at it and having the hindsight of the knowledge I have now, to join a campaign midway through, having never played any RPG before, let alone the system.
Yeah.
And then having to create like a level 10 or 11 character from scratch in what in retrospect is a very complex system with so many choices
and rules.
Like 3.5, by the time you get all the compendium stuff, there's like 400 feats.
And that's the thing, folks, if you don't know about this, is that these games can last years if you want them to, because these campaigns can keep on going. And a lot of these systems have books upon books upon books that are released with all sorts of rules that add on and add new features and characters you can play. And so Steve came into a campaign that had probably been going on for at least a year. And it was with me and my friends who lived in different places, Boston and Atlanta or wherever we were at that time. And he joined in and was like, what the fuck's going on? But you made it work, except you died a bunch of times.
Oh, my God. So that brings me to what was going to be my opening question. But what is the first character you ever made for a tabletop role-playing game?
First character I ever made?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That had to have been in college when I first played. And it was with those guys that you eventually played with online. We played in person. Except for Cameron, he didn't go to school with us. And we played pretty fast and loose, but they had all the books, like they're all in paper because there weren't PDFs and stuff back then. That wasn't a thing. When AOL days were a thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I made probably, if I remember correctly, I liked old wizards. So I probably made an old wizard to be my first character, which is not a good first character because magic users
super squishy and magic users
complicated back in that system. Like you had to look up all your spells and stuff. It's not a good first character to do. You want to do like a fighter or something.
And not only that, cantrips didn't exist yet, so you had a certain amount of spell slots, and that was it.
Yeah, and it was complicated. It was also you're kind of done if you blow all your load early on. But I just like the idea of playing like a wizard and crazy. And I always get into character and do voices for all my characters and stuff. So that's how I do it. So do you remember your first character that you did?
Yeah, it was for that campaign. And I designed a sorcerer who is in hindsight just so squishy, just so killable.
Human
in hindsight. I don't even remember. Maybe a half elf or something.
Right.
And he was super squishy, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't understand any of the mechanics yet, and I had way too much stuff to pick at level 12. It was just insane.
Yeah, it's pretty high level in this game.
I remember Cameron worked to make me like a custom magic item that I literally never got to. I got to use like one time before he died. And as Jarman mentioned, I had a lot of very quick succession learning curve things with this first campaign, in that I think I went through 4 or 5 characters in not that many sessions
with deaths.
And so this wizard was the first, that the sorcerer was the first of those deaths. And part of it, and this also another first, was my first time dealing with like another player I just didn't like. And I think his name was Chris.
Yes.
It's such a generic name that I'm not worried about sharing it.
No, it's fine. He has
Chris.
no online presence whatsoever, so it's fine.
And from what I heard from both Cameron and you, he was a good guy and a good guy to play with.
No, good guy is true. Not good guy to play with.
Okay, because I had heard he's had other characters that were fine. But he came in and made this, what now I would know is termed a lawful stupid paladin. A paladin that is so righteous, it is to the detriment of himself and the entire group.
I must do right at all times.
And we were in some sort of caves underground, and we ended up getting into a fight with some guys, and it was pretty hairy. And he decided he didn't care, and his character was going to press on into this dungeon. And he woke up a Hydra and led it straight to us.
Which are terrifying creatures.
We came out of this fight that we barely survived because guess what? Our main tank wasn't there because he ran off to do whatever. We're all like half health. He comes out and there's a Hydra there. And then this is where my just lack of knowledge of the system came into play. I didn't take any movement because I didn't understand what was going to happen. Like I didn't get it. I had no reference to what the monster was. And so I stood there and Karen's like, so no movement? And I was like, nah, I guess I just stand. Like I've already used my attack. Like what else am I going to do? And he goes, okay, well, since you're the only one the Hydra can see, all 9 of its heads shoot fireballs at you.
I remember that.
And he like rolled and he's like, 7 of them hit. And each one does 3d8 damage. It's like I took 21 d8 damage and was just gone.
Obliterated.
Because of this idiot.
So I have to tell a side story about that guy, Chris. Great guy. We were roommates in college. He was ethnically ambiguous looking, even though he was Italian. So he had that kind of olive colored skin where he could have been anything. And he decided to go join the police force. Initially did an internship with them when we were in college. He tried to learn Arabic. He was going to join the military because he was very valuable in the sense that he was in college. He would be an officer right out of college.
See, I thought he was in the military.
And then he did join the military as far as we knew. And we don't know what happened to that because he dropped out of all social media. He's still, to this day, not on any social media. I've not been in touch with him for years because he's just gone. And so our theory is, me and my buddies from college that were friends with him, is that he's in some spec ops thing that we'll never understand, and he's just gone. We see his wife occasionally on social media, and he has a couple kids, but he is just gone to the wind. So that kind of
the next time you see him, he'll open his first Facebook account at like 44.
Yeah. He'll be
and
retired.
It'll be like finally retired will be the first post
from the paper company. That's what he'll say.
Yeah, man, 30 years working for the census.
Yeah, and he's like incredibly buff and like knows 4 languages. But anyways, and I think I didn't die very much in most of my campaigns, but Steve asked me the other day, think about like your character deaths.
Your best character death.
Yeah, and like probably the best one is not quite a death. But one of my favorite groups I'm in, I played this really promiscuous female sorceress named Luvana, and she would try to seduce everything and anything that she came into contact with. That was her like, because sorcerers have a high charisma for their other powers.
They do.
And she was very boobalicious, and so. But she was playing a game of this game called with cards of many things. I think it's called
the deck of many things.
Deck of many things. Yes. And if people who play D&D a lot will know, this is a very dangerous deck to play with because the card you pull up could give you a random.
Some of them are great.
Some of them are fantastic. Well, you'll be a permanent bonus to your stats. Like cool.
Some of them are like a void opens up and you fall into a pit of death.
And that kind of what has happened to me. So I got like I got +2 bonus to like 2 of my stats. I'm like, holy crap, I'm going to keep playing. So, because that was her personality. She was a gambler. She was audacious. And the next card came up and a portal opened up and sucked me in. And the DM took me to the other room because the players weren't going to know what happened to me. I just disappeared into this void. And he told me that I was going to be sucked into this dimension where I'd be fighting this demon for all of eternity.
Wow.
And it was a demon that had like a hole for a body, like a mouth for a body that would be like trying to constantly suck me in and eat me. And I had to be fighting it for as long as I could possibly live. and they never found me. So I was just gone forever. The fun part was we played another campaign a couple years later where they went to another dimension and I had escaped and I was an NPC at that point. So, but the new players didn't know who I was, but the players knew who I was, but like their characters didn't know who I was, but I was like all powerful now. And I had come out, I had defeated the demon and escaped the dimension. But technically my player died. I had to make a new character because my character was just gone from that dimension.
I had something kind of similar. I was in, it was a 5e campaign, like a homebrew sort of deal. And there's this evil sorceress. There's always an evil sorceress. Yeah. It's like one of those classic tropes. And I remember she had some sort of magic item that was like all powerful. And she invited us to meet her.
Mm.
And we were interested in this magic item for some reason. I can't quite remember. And she was all high and mighty. And so I kind of bluffed because I was like a high charisma character. I was a cleric, a cleric bard, I think, if I remember correctly. And so we don't know what this thing does. So she starts talking about her power. I'm like, well, you don't seem that all powerful to me, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, would you like a demonstration of my power? And I went, yeah, sure, go ahead. And she like snapped her fingers and a fissure opened up in the floor and I was just gone.
Oh,
no chance to save. The group had no chance to do anything. I was just gone.
Wow.
And like later on, I ended up, this was her first time DMing, and she ended up asking me a lot of advice as we went. And I said, how about you and I just workshop as we go?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll like mentor you through this and help you. And so she like came to realize that was like just a very bad morale kick in the nuts move
for the group and everybody involved
to just take the healer and just be like, Andy's gone. But for like the final session, or maybe the last two, we ended up having to like dive into the pits of hell. And so then they find my old character chained up to a wall.
That's hilarious.
He's been like captured in hell all this time.
That's great when they do a callback, you know? That's the fun part.
So you got to make a cameo and do a little Healy stuff.
Nice.
Right at the end.
Well, that's funny because I had a cleric, Tortle, which is a turtle person, and he was a asexual, bi-amorous, but asexual turtle. That was the thing. He could fall in love with any gender, but he didn't have sex. But then they kept making the joke. They're like, you realize that turtles have a cloaca, right? Which is basically the cloaca comes into effect later, but cloaca where they go to the bathroom and have sex through the same organ, and it's all one thing.
Yeah, it's great.
It's great. So anyways,
a lot of reptiles have it.
And I rolled a 1 when we were doing this cave collapse thing, and I didn't save, so I rolled a 1, and so they had to kill me. And so, but they decided to take pity on me because everyone loved my character because he was like, "Hey guys, I'm the Turtle Cleric," and I was just so lovable. Everyone liked me. That they didn't want to kill me, but they had to roll they rolled on the die of body parts die. Have you seen one of those?
No.
It's a fun injury die you can use where you roll this die and it has all different body parts on it.
You lost your cloaca?
And they put the crotch one landed. And so I lost my cloaca. So like, okay, he's not dead, but your cloaca's gone. I'm like, oh, Jesus. So that happened. This is what can happen in a D&D game.
Do you have any characters that started as one thing and ended as something completely different?
Usually not by fault of my own. I remember one guy who I was making a very moral. He was a former guard of the town, and he was about to retire. And this is how I explained he was a level 1 character, even though he was so old and experienced. Is that he was just a guard his whole life, but he's very grizzled, very good at his job, and he goes out to adventure with them as like I think like a paladin. And I thought he'd be this good guy, and I said we were in the forest talking to the Fae. And I gave a compliment of how attractive this young Fae was, but she was of age and everything, but she was very short. And for some reason that became a thing that he was this creeper who liked very short women. Nice. And so he goes from being this honorable guard to being this creeper. And so I just kind of embraced it from then on. I was just like, yeah, I'm Dick Graves, former guard. And man, I love me some halflings. Oh, God, so hot. So that's what it became.
Nice.
What about you?
The two I can think of is one was a Dungeon World character whose name was Augie, Ogren Zog. We went by Augie. And he was like a big half orc with these huge bulging arms, like the classic tusk sticking out, like, hey guys, how's it going? Like kind of the orcs from like Warcraft 2, kind of, but a little bit more like, hey, yeah, but not quite that far. I pulled it back so it was just a little human. Hey, where can I find and so he was supposed to be the muscle, but he was also really dumb. Like that's how I played him. I played him as dumb. So because of that, he had no candor. So like I remember we went to a town and they're like, oh, we got to find this guy. How are we going to find him? We could ask around in the tavern. Blah, blah. And I go, is there anyone soon to be in charge here? Oh yeah, there's a foreman of the lumber town. I walk up and like, oh, hey, excuse me, sir. Hi, I'm Augie. These are my friends. We're looking for a guy. I was wondering if you knew him. And like the GM was so taken aback by this. And then like I rolled good on a charisma roll, but just by chance, and like pulled it off. And we got what we needed without having to be conniving or insane. I just literally walked up and asked somebody, and I just kept this up to the point where I just redirected all my stats into charisma after designing this guy to be the muscle.
A charismatic barbarian, basically.
Right. And I used him to no end, just being like this sweet, lovable idiot who just had a way with people.
He was a tough John C. Reilly.
Oh, yeah. I did do a wrestler character that was basically John C. Reilly.
Because he's so lovable. Well, that's
I'm gonna wreck it.
I'm wrecking it. So there's a big thing too of having toxic players in your group. So if it's a social activity, so there's always somebody in the group who can be a little bit like either annoying or just actually being actively toxic. And what's like your biggest example of that, you think?
Chris was my first example. Was my first encounter with a toxic player who like didn't like it was almost like he didn't come to play the game with us.
And he wasn't necessarily being
come to play a game on his own
about that, but he did it I think almost did it by accident, and he was just really bad. Yeah, but he wasn't
just chaotic, stupid, like
right.
Lawful stupid. But I've been very lucky in that I avoid those players, and now that I'm a DM, I can really feel them out a lot better. Two come to mind from when I've DM'd. One was a guy named Lance, we'll call him. And he worked with me, and we found each other through like a work group sort of thing. And we needed 2 new players, and I invited 2 new people. And one of them ended up being great, and it's someone I still play with. And then there was Lance. He designed the most like shadowy, like emo lord character. Like it was almost a caricature.
They call them edgelords, I think.
Yeah, in the edgelords. This is just the most edgelord character that you can imagine. He was like an ex-soldier who was a shock trooper who was sent in to destabilize governments. But then on one of his missions, the sky turned red and all of his men were killed. And then when he came to, he was dead. But then death wouldn't take him. So now he's cursed to wander the world. And I was like, oh my God, dude.
You're so cool, bro. You're so cool.
Oh God. And so he has this whole backstory that he basically like pimps me out to explain. And then he like could not make a good choice when it came to getting along with the group.
Mm.
And I'm all with being an asshole if you're the group's asshole.
Right.
You become a tool for the group. When the group needs an asshole, you can fill that. But don't be an asshole to the group.
That doesn't help the game at all. Yeah,
it doesn't help. And my favorite example was, they were on a ship and they had just gone through this really terrible thing, and the druid was trying to catch a seagull because she wanted like a familiar, basically like a pet.
Yeah.
And she screwed up her roll. She just had a really bad roll, and so he's like, "Can I try it?" And I was like, "Oh, he's going to catch it for her."
How nice.
That's really nice.
But no.
He caught it and killed it in front of her, the druid.
God.
So already this was like, come on, dude. Okay. And we moved on, and it was like the next session, and they went to town, and they had like a shopping day kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so he went and he like bought a pheasant and then cooked it and then gave it to her.
What?
As an apology for killing the bird.
Okay.
And I was like, what? No. Stop.
What are you doing?
Stop. I'm okay with edgy characters and dark characters as long as they change.
Right. Or
it's
just
fine to be the guy who doesn't trust somebody, because then after a few adventures, when you start to trust the group, that's how you develop a character.
That's an arc right there.
Right. Where you do something completely out of character because you finally trust the group.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. But just to do the same stupid thing over and over again, or pick the edgiest, dumbest thing every time.
Because then it would be in character for the rest of the group not to be with you in a group anymore. Like it would make sense for them to drop you. Oh, well, I mean, I had one group that I got to join, which was a situation where it was kind of like where Steve joined our group that had been playing for a year. These guys have been playing for 2 or 3 years in the same campaign.
Holy Toledo.
They were level 17 when I joined.
Dude, that's legit.
So the reason I found out was they were their dungeon master. This guy worked for Paizo. And if you don't know what Paizo is the people who make Pathfinder. And Pathfinder basically some people worked for D&D, and some people who just didn't like how D&D was working. They basically made D&D 3.75 and branched off in their own company and called it Pathfinder. So they made this whole new campaign. But this guy worked for Paizo he would take modules that were made, these like campaigns that were made for D&D, and he would officially, through Paizo, convert them into the Pathfinder system. So that's cool. He was paid to do that. It was a side job, but it was still something he enjoyed doing. So he was very good, knew all the lore, all the history, all the rules off the top of his head. He was kind of on the spectrum kind of dude, but very cool and very friendly and very fun. But then the people I was with in the group, there was one toxic guy, and they decided to start a new campaign after that level 20 campaign finally ended. And since I was the new guy, they said every time a new person joins our crazy group that's been around for 10 years, we make a campaign based around them. So they were going to make a campaign based around me as a player. And so they told me to make a character, and the whole thing's based around my storyline. And I was like, okay, cool. What they didn't tell me is that these guys were all into anime, and they were really into these like love story animes where like all these girls are kind of like, it's like teen dating animes kind of thing. As kind of a joke.
Like you do.
And so basically the whole time, the mission was for each of the players to seduce me so I fell in love with them and would off in a relationship with them. But they didn't tell me that. And so they kept getting frustrated at the fact that I wasn't returning their affections and kept focusing on the mission of like killing the bad guy. And so that was already there. And then the one really toxic guy, no matter what game we were playing, whenever I would do something, he's like, oh, your character wouldn't do that. You would do this. No, do this, do this, do this. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. He's like, no, you wouldn't do that. Here, have him roll for this. He would say that every single time I tried to do anything. So that was the most frustrating thing in the entire way. He undermined every decision I made and told me I was doing it wrong. I was making a dumb choice. I was like, let me be my fucking character. And then finally I find out at the end of the campaign that they were all pissed at me because I was not picking them or choosing one of them to fall in love with. I'm like, what? That wasn't what I signed up for. So I eventually left that group. I didn't
sign up to fulfill your waifu fantasies.
Exactly. It was a little weird. We were all dudes. There's not a single girl in that entire group.
I did not pick the body pillow race.
Exactly. So then I join a group that has 3 girls in it, and I'm like, okay, this is so much better when there's not just a bunch of dudes hanging around being weirdos. But yeah, I think a lot of your groups have at least one girl in them, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, and we actually just picked up a second for my every other Sunday group. And I specifically said, like, if anyone knows any women that want to join, we could use some diversity.
Yes, exactly. But yeah.
So another toxic one, and this is one as a DM that the first player I ever kicked out.
Oh yeah, that did happen.
We'll call her Kimmy.
Mm-hmm.
And Kimmy and I had played together in a different campaign, which is how we met. And she was really tough to play with. Like, even as a player, she made really weird choices, and not to say stupid choices, and not even suboptimal, but choices that made almost no sense.
Very odd choices.
Very odd choices.
I played with her a little bit too.
Yeah. And then even when she did play, about 50% of the time she was completely aloof. 25% of the time she was totally into it. And the other 25% she was like almost hostile towards every decision that the DM made or every call a DM made. And as a player, this didn't, it wasn't my problem. But then when I started DMing for it, it became my problem.
Yep.
And I remember she had like an ongoing health issue, which was fair. Like, you know, your life is your life.
Yeah.
And I remember she canceled one week. And when I asked her why, she's like, well, I've been in bed all weekend because of blank, because of health issue. And she's like, and I've got a lot of laundry to do. And I'm like, what? We played for 3 hours on a Sunday night. You can go and put a load in.
Yeah.
And then come back and play or fold laundry. Like, I was like, this isn't a real hurdle. This is something you're making up.
Right.
Like, I don't doubt that you've been in bed all week or like this medical issue, but your reason for saying you can't be there is completely bunk.
Her real problem was being honest about what was really going on.
Right. And that's fair. It is, yeah. Which, mind you, it felt extra weird for her to like share this deeply personal medical thing with me and then be like, I can't play because laundry.
Yeah. And then make up a different reason. Yeah, that's
right.
true.
I'm like, what? And so she like missed 1 week. And that's fair. Like, no, cancels happen.
Sure.
And then the next week, I like did a check-in on Monday. Didn't say anything. Finally, like Friday, we play on Sunday. She finally chimes in and she goes, I may or may not be able to make it. And I was like, when will you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so she says, well, a friend of mine really wants to play like the Jackbox games. And so that's either going to be Saturday or Sunday. And if it's Sunday, I won't be there. And I was like, what? You know, we play, like, you know, the schedule.
It's not a priority for her.
Right. And so then she came back and she's like, hey, we're doing it Saturday so I can be there. And I texted her. And so I felt shitty, like as the DM. And then I got texts from 2 of my other players saying that they felt that was shitty.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, it's no longer just me. So I asked her, I said, if the thing had been on Sunday, would you have skipped? And she was like, yeah. And I said, okay, you're out. I was like, I don't expect this to be your number one priority in life. Stuff happens, but that I do not have time. This is, I said to my group, because I addressed it afterwards. I do not have time in my life as a father of 2 with a full-time job to plan for people that don't plan to be here.
Right.
I don't have time for that.
And it'd be different if it was like, oh, well, my sister, who I never get to talk to, wants to play Jackbox games, and I need to prioritize her. I haven't seen her in so long. Yeah, she wants to do it online or through Zoom, and I'll have to miss Sunday if she's going to be able to play. That would be like you see why the Jackbox games was important.
Right. Or if it was time specific, or I've got friends in town or anything. But no, it was like this buddy of mine, who lives in town, really wants to play.
That's not a big deal.
So yeah, and I was like, no, we aren't a priority. And then I remember she like texted me this tirade, like, well, I'm sorry I didn't make you feel important enough. I went, nope, you're not turning this around on me. And I just blocked her. I was like, I have nothing more to say to her. And then she chimes into the thread, our like big group thread. She's like, Steve asked me to drop out, blah, blah, blah. And I went, yep. And I just kicked her out. I was like, I'm not letting her bring poison into this thread. Because that's what she was trying to do. She was trying to rally the troops around her.
Mm-hmm.
And like when I brought it up in the thing, no one said shit.
Yeah, they're like, thank goodness she's kind of gone.
No one said shit. So
where it's funny because like in the group I'm in now, I went through a phase there probably about 4 months ago where I had to cancel like 3 weeks not necessarily in a row, like not consecutively. And I was like, guys, I'm canceling so much because of work. I understand if you guys just want to move forward without me, find somebody else. Because they were talking about a friend of theirs who wanted to join. And I was like, if you want him to join, I understand. Like, I recognize. I gave them the out because I was like, I don't want to do this to you. You're trying to plan a campaign. I recognize this problem. And they all came out and they were just like, no, we know that if you're canceling, it's important because you wouldn't be doing it otherwise. You're still in the fucking group. And I'm like, okay, thanks, guys. It was just so sweet because they knew I wasn't just flippantly canceling because they know me better than that. And I haven't shown them evidence that I didn't care about the campaign like she had, where it's just kind of like, yeah, it was an afterthought. And then when she shows up, she's also not giving it her all either. She's kind of half-assing it, you know.
Right. And yeah, and that's the other thing. She was difficult. Like you said, you played with her.
Yeah, difficult to play with. Yeah.
And the character you played with was
out there.
Was out there to the point like where it was unplayable.
Like, what is happening right now? Is this her or is this the character? I don't know what's going on.
So she played a wizard who had lost her memory and basically was like schizophrenic.
Yeah.
and like had a notebook that she wrote things in, but she wrote things over and over and over again to the point where it was just like a bunch of symbols.
And she was in love with my character too.
She was in love with your character. But I remember there's a mechanic in the game we played where she was supposed to be on watch, and she rolled well. And instead of telling you guys about danger, she drew a picture of it in her book, and you guys walked into a trap.
Yeah. That one, great. That was great.
And it was just one of those. I remember after that, there was like, all right, well, I guess we can never trust her to do anything.
Nope.
Not a thing. The other issue, and this is, we can talk about this. And this is something I carries over me from improv days. Have you ever had like a player that just pimps out the DM too much?
What do you mean by pimps out?
So that's like an improv term, or at least that's where I learned it, where you hang someone out to dry with expectations.
Oh, like it's all on you now, basically, kind of thing.
Or like, yeah, and I heard he had a dog that spoke with an Australian accent, and then you look at the other actor.
Oh, damn it.
Like you pimp them out to be the dog with the Australian accent.
Now I got to do that because yes,
now,
and
there are some games that's the premise. Like, if you ever watched Whose Lines That Anyway, there's the superhero game where everybody introduces the next superhero.
You're kind of trying to screw up the other person. Yeah.
Right. And that's the point of the game. But
right.
Most improv, that is not the point.
You're trying to help your teammates, not screw them over.
So anybody who's like just set like an insane backstory that then the DM has to try to figure out.
Not too much, because unfortunately, I just say this truthfully, I've not played with enough people that are like me who want to do a lot of role playing and interesting story building. My buddy AJ, who was in that original campaign with Chris that we talked about, he was very big into the story building, but he also was kind of in the edgelord territory where everything was really intense about his backstory and his big, serious soldier guy. Whereas like I want to be in more groups of people who are just like really having fun getting into the story and character elements. And that would be a big opportunity for them to pimp out the DM and say like, and my backstory is this giant, huge concept that you now have to deal with. But I haven't been in a lot of groups that had people like that. They're all more the mechanics type people and not a lot of the character building people.
I didn't notice it as a player. Now that I've been the DM, I've been pimped out a few times. And basically what I found is like, if I don't want to do it, I don't do it.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's on them. Like, because this is the thing. I don't run homebrews. I run modules, things that already exist, and I'll make little adjustments here or there, but I'm not gonna make an entire storyline.
Explain to our audience what homebrew is so they know, just in case.
Oh, yeah. Homebrew is like if you came up with a story and a universe and a place that you wanted to explain and a big bad guy and their evil plot. Like if you wanted to come up with your own original idea, you would run a homebrew campaign. You didn't get it from a book. But then there are these things that already exist that are published by Wizards of the Coast called modules, which are pre-generated adventures.
Right.
And there is a little bit of difference where sometimes things can happen in different orders and that sort of stuff. But for the most part, every part is canon. And that's what I have time in my life for right now.
Right. Exactly.
And so like I will customize maybe a specific encounter. Or I'll take something advantageous. Like in this last one, actually it's finishing up in the next 1 or 2 sessions. The campaign I'm doing, Dragons of Icefire Peak, we had a paladin in the party who served this god, the Dawnbringer, or the Lord of Light or something. I can't remember the name of it. And so I do a little bit of research about and his whole thing is that he wants to like defeat the forces of evil so that he can ascend ranks in this like church or association he's in. Great easy goal, gives me stuff to work with without pimping me out. So I look it up, and Talos, who's like a god of evil, god of storms and chaos, is an enemy of his order, and they happen to have a presence in this module. There's like 3 or 4 things where they go and they fight disciples of Talos. And so with a few small adjustments, I was able to advantageously gear that towards him and allow him to ascend ranks. And it was special for him. It was good for him. And I didn't really have to do anything.
Right.
So I'm okay with stuff like that. But I've got a the woman that we actually just invited. I said we need new blood, and can we please be diverse?
Right.
She has a good backstory to begin with. And she might listen to this. I don't think so, but maybe. Where she's like a royalty, but she's not only the girl, but she's not even the oldest. So her older brother is set to take the throne or become the Lord. And so she runs away. She's always like the outdoors more. She was always the mischievous type. It's like a classic archetype.
Yeah, the Elsa.
Right, the Elsa. But then her brother gets killed. And now her father wants her back because he needs to marry her off to solidify the king's position. And so he sends men after her.
That's a good backstory. I like it.
And then there's also the open end of like, was her brother murdered? And if so, are they after her? Now, like, there's good stuff in there and threads for me to pull. But then, that's so great. But then she's like, then after running away from the kingdom, I headed north and I ran into a village where I settled down for a while and met a mysterious man and his daughter who came to the town a few years before. And then the town was beset by giants who pillaged the town and ransacked it and stole a girl. And I was able to lead a resistance against them and rout them from the land. But then they all headed north into the Dale, which is where this all takes place.
Jesus.
So now I want to find out why they took the girl and where they were going and what their evil plot was. And I'm like, nope, nope.
That is complicated. Good for her, though. That is complicated as fuck.
That's great. And for a homebrew, that would be great. Yeah. I would love to use that, but not for a module where I'm going to have to create an entire part of the adventure to make this happen.
Well, you know what's great? I discovered today because I was researching one shots, which are basically D&D sessions you can play over one session with maybe some new people and stuff, but not thinking about how a lot of these one shots that are created can be just added to campaigns that already exist. So things like that, where she wants that adventure to happen, that could be a one shot for one session that you find already pre-made, but kind of form it to what she's talking about, which is kind of helpful, which I never thought to do that before, which is kind of neat.
The like very first quest they go on after like the initial getting there quest happens to feature a giant. And so now she's like stuck on it.
Oh, she's like, is that the giant?
Yeah. She's like, I want to go back and question him when we're a little bit more powerful and figure out and maybe follow him or do some reconnaissance. I'm like, oh my God, stop.
And she's new to this, or she's been playing for a while?
She is not new to role playing.
I was going to say, she doesn't sound like it. She sounds like she's pretty experienced.
And that's another one of my bugaboos. Yeah. That's a bugaboo, is people that create level 1 characters that have no business being level 1 characters.
And that's the thing is, some people, when they say, my rule is if I have a question about if like a DM says to me, no, you can't do that, I have one question before I become annoying and it doesn't matter as much. So if I'll be like, but can I do it because of this? I can bring that up. I can say one question. And if the DM still says no, I move on. If you don't think he's wrong, he or she is wrong, I'll just be like, okay, we're moving on. Because you can bring it up, because sometimes the DM will say, oh shit, you're right, because you have that power, right? Okay, cool. And then they'll fix it. But even if you know you're right, you ask the one question, the DM says no, just move on. Just because you don't know what's going on, don't argue, just keep going. That's my rule.
No, I just had that with a player actually in the same group, where they were breaking into like the giant's lair to find some stolen goods. And the giant came in and he like moved into the scene and yelled at an ogre to go get something. And then it was back to the top of the initiative. And basically the way I had it in my head, I was like, when we get to the end of their turn, I'll have this narrative thing happen.
Right.
And then he'll come into initiative on the next turn. And so he comes in, he yells at this guy, blah, blah, blah. And then we start at the top of the initiative and then it gets to his turn because he rolled pretty well. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, all right, he runs up to you and he smashes you with his club. And one of my players is like, wait, why does he get to go twice? I go, he didn't get to go twice. He moved into the scene.
Right.
And this is his first turn. Well, I don't understand how he gets to take 2 actions before I take mine. And I was like, he didn't take an action. He didn't attack. He didn't take a bonus action. He didn't do anything mechanic. He walked in.
Yeah.
Like, and he was like, I just don't understand why he gets to do 2 things where I get 1. I go, if you want to retcon it, and I came in and take an action, we can do that. Ooh. And then it'll still be my turn again.
Because it was part of the narrative, you bastard.
It was part of the narrative. But if you want to make it part of the turn, we can do that. And he can hit you twice. And Alice and the new woman actually said, or maybe he's the GM and he can do what he wants. And I was like, yes,
that's a valuable
right.
player. That's a valuable player. But that's the thing. Always, if you think something's wrong, politely ask a clarification or offer a new piece of information of why you think that might not be right. And if they still throw it back at you, just move on and politely move on. But it's good to, it's sometimes the DM needs a reminder. I know if I'm DMing, I always want help from my players to know what their characters can do, because I can't remember every detail of what your characters can do. So like,
there's so many times I go, oh, that sounds awesome. Can you remind me what that is?
Yeah. What is that? How's that work?
I cast blah, blah, blah. Great. What does that do?
Exactly. And then, so if they're wrong, they'll probably, if they're a good DM, be like, oh yeah, shit, never mind. That doesn't work. I'll do this. But just move on after that first questioning. That's just a good idea. Don't be a toxic player, basically. But I basically, the last thing I was just going to say is that I for the longest time had two groups going, and I loved all the guys and gals in my groups, but I had one group that was strictly sticking by a module, and there was no real room for improvisation and not a lot of room for goofing around.
What module was it?
This was called Zeitgeist for Pathfinder. It was just very in the weeds, like a lot of lore and stuff that I couldn't keep track of. And then I have my other group who I've been with for years as well, and I'm still with them this day. And we goof around. There's a lot of homebrew stuff going on because the two DMs that kind of switch off. They're both very steeped in the lore and stuff, so they know what they're doing. Three DMs, if you count the girl who also is really good at it. We'll call her Witness. It's too close to her name.
Can I get a witness?
Because you knew her in high school. But anyways, they all are good DMs. They know they're doing, so they do a lot of homebrew stuff. And it's just that we can improvise, we can goof around, we drink, we have a good time. And that's what I think the heart of it, our playing Dungeons and Dragons should be in tabletop role-playing games, is having fun with your friends. But like we said earlier, you got to structure some of that. Otherwise, there's no structure to it, and you're just kind of goofing around. And so the fun part is also the progressing in the story. That's what makes it fun. But as we move into Halloween, you have a Halloween thing coming up soon, don't you, for tabletop role play?
Yeah, and I don't even have to run it.
What is it all about? What kind of thing is this?
So we were going to have somebody miss, and I was going to run anyway, because I'm fine running down one, sometimes two, depending on the size of the group. And the new woman said, hey, instead of that, how about I run a spooky Halloween one shot?
Yeah.
And I said, great. And she said, I'm going to run it in Call of Cthulhu. And I said, nah, I'm good.
Oh,
you guys have fun.
You don't like that system?
No, I do not care for Call of Cthulhu. Look, I play fantasy games to like escape from reality. I don't want to play a gritty, realistic, dark fantasy game. That's just not what I want to do.
So folks out there, basically Call of Cthulhu is its own system, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, a game system. And it's very cool and very interesting and different, but you definitely die a lot in that game. And it's visceral
and die. You go insane. But like, if you get shot with a gun, you die, basically.
You're dead. Yeah.
You get stabbed. You might get stabbed a second time, but you die.
Yeah.
And there's like far too many skills and far too many things to be good at. But no, it's just not my cup of tea. And I said, you guys can absolutely meet and I'll just take the week off. And she said, how about Dungeons and Dragons 5? And I said, yes, I'll play that. And so it's some sort of like, we work for the church and we've been sent to investigate undead something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made this asinine character, just asinine. Because she said you can spend 500 gold or whatever you want and pick one magic item.
That's a lot of money.
And someone asked, well, what rarity of magic item? How powerful? And she basically said, whatever.
Ooh.
It's like, what are you thinking? And she made like a vague threat of like, but if you pick something too powerful, there will be consequences. And I was like, okay, whatever.
All right.
If you don't want to set boundaries, anything's fair game. So I made this absolutely asinine character with the goofiest stats ever, who I'm just playing as a 71-year-old cleric he's got -1 dexterity and -1 strength. He's old as hell, but I made him like super knowledgeable and wise, and he like wants to prove he still belongs in the field. But because of this weird setup she gave us, I was able to do this insane thing. Just insane. with free healing and lots of really good spells and really high armor. I've got 20 AC.
And you're only level 4, right?
Yeah, level 4 with 20 AC and 8 strength, just for the record. All those things occurred.
8 strength.
Right. 8 strength and 8 dex. And I have, and I'll nerd out for a second. We've been nerding this whole time, but whatever. I'll get specifically nerdy. The new fighting style, Interception, is amazing. It's amazing. It's basically a once per round free heal.
Yeah, because it takes the damage from someone else, basically. Is that what it was?
You use your reaction, and if somebody within 5 feet of you is hit, you can interpose either a sword or your shield, like a weapon or a shield, to reduce the damage by 1d10 plus 2. So that's an average of 7.5 damage per turn that I will just be blocking as long as I position myself correctly.
Basically, if you're near an ally, you can lunge forward and block an attack going towards them with your shield or sword, and take a lot of the damage away.
That's like a free healing word every turn.
Without having any strength, which is great.
Without having any strength and without having to spend a spell slot.
There you go.
Oh, man. I'm good.
What book was that from?
Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is the one that introduced the additional fighting styles, including an unarmed fighting style, which finally makes fighting with bare fists feasible.
Be a monk.
I also have a crazy astral monk build that is also insane for different reasons. But that's one thing I'll say about D&D. Like, I was never good at science or math, but for whatever reason, I am a goddamn engineer when it comes
characters
to making weird asinine characters in D&D 5e, finding weird interactions, finding ways to accomplish very specific things with a character. For whatever reason, I can do that.
That's good. I need to send you my Minotaur that I'm currently playing because I need to make him better at taking out spellcasters.
Okay.
Because he can't cancel any spells. He's level 11 now, I think.
So you have 3 attacks. Did you multi-class?
No, maybe it's 10.
Okay, because 11 you get... Did you multi-class?
Yeah, he's 1 level rogue.
Okay, so at 12 you'll get your 3rd attack.
Because my problem is I have all the grapple stuff in play. I'm a big grappler. So basically, guys, my Minotaur is a wrestler. This was on Steven's recommendation. It was great at first, but now we're encountering spellcasters where when I grapple them, it doesn't matter that they're grappled because their spell components is spoken. So they can still cast their spells when I have them grappled. And so I feel useless against spellcasters. I'm this giant Minotaur and somehow I'm not even doing any difference to the group because I'm just grappling the spellcaster who's still spellcasting at them. And I'm like, this sucks. Like, how can I make this better?
So is your issue that it's spellcasting at other players or at you?
Either. I think the last case, it was something they casted on the group and I couldn't stop it and I felt powerless. I was like, I didn't help. I didn't help these guys because I had this guy grappled and it didn't matter because he could still yell out a spell at them. And I was like, I guess I need to announce that I'm covering his mouth or something.
No, I mean, if you just hit 10 with that, you probably just got an ASI, right?
What's an ASI?
Ability score improvement.
Oh,
we can talk about this not on the podcast.
Yeah, we will. But I'm just saying I need to get Steve's help because Steve's very good. As he said, he's come into his own with the engineering sense of building his characters.
I'm a goddamn mechanic.
But you do a lot of research. You watch a lot of videos.
I can barely make Legos happen, but for some reason.
You watch a lot of videos. You have some research and reading. You know your stuff.
In just 7 days, I can make you a man.
I'll make a man out of you. And I'm running a one shot for Halloween. I'm excited about it. I don't DM too often, but I'm doing a pre-made module by a third-party person made a module for D&D 5e. I
read through a little bit of it. It looks pretty spooky.
It's spooky and fun, and it's very based off of Edgar Allan Poe. It's called The Mask of the Worm. My D&D group can't know that, but they don't listen to this podcast, so it's okay. They won't know. And
they're dead to me.
Yeah, and plus this podcast will come out after Halloween is done, so they won't even hear it. But anyways, yeah, it's going to be fun and it's short and sweet. And always, if you're thinking about DMing out there, it can be easy if you get a good module. It's written well. It kind of guides you through it. You don't have to be super experienced. Like Steve said, you're not making a giant homebrew campaign.
I mean, hell, there's even some modules where they say when they get to this door, read this.
Exactly.
Like there are some that are that specific.
Some like hold your hand completely throughout the whole thing. Yeah. So not that bad. But anyways, that's our experience. We're still very much steeped in it in our mid to late 30s, steeped into D&D, and don't plan quitting anytime soon.
That's right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of the Sappy Crab podcast.
Thanks
right. For joining us. And come back next time when we talk about something so hard-hitting that we don't even know what it is yet.
I don't know either, yeah. And thanks for joining us down this delightful stumble down gaming memory lane.
And don't forget, the good old days weren't always that good.
This podcast was brought to you by A Play on Nerds.